Welcome back to another episode of Dying Out Loud, the show where nothing is left unsaid and we make the most of every moment that we have. Today's episode is a really interesting and special one. I've got my friend Deano Sutter here today, and I met Deano a few years ago in a coaching conversation where I had reached out to him to explore a men's coaching group that he was putting together. This is a perfect example of one of those situations where you never truly understand the impact that you have on another human unless they make it a point to connect with you and share that. So today I'm going to share a little bit with Deano about the role that he unknowingly played in my decision to pursue coaching, and we'll just chat about some other life moments along the way. Deano, welcome to Dying Out Loud.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super stoked about this conversation.
Awesome. I'm so glad to have you here. And, as I mentioned to you, when we were chatting a little while ago, this one felt really special to me because in, the moments of life that are more often than not just fleeting, we very rarely understand the type of impact that we can have on people with something as simple as, a 30-minute to a 1 hour conversation. It's so important to me because in this situation and facing the reality that I'm facing, I feel like there are so many people that this opportunity would be, I want them to be able to experience this because letting people know the way that they have influenced you or impacted the decisions that you make, it's like giving that back to someone and letting them know, keep doing what you're doing because you are impacting far more people than you realize. I think this is a perfect example of just how true that really is. Any thoughts on that, Deano? Just in your role as a coach, obviously you have conversations with tons of people throughout the course of a month
Yep.
or a year, some of which you may never speak to again, and others you may have a connection with. I'd love to hear your thoughts just on the impact and sharing that message with people.
Yeah, no, I think that you kind of nailed it. So many people walk through life not realizing the impact that they have or the impact that they could have. And I take every conversation. Anybody who gets on my calendar, I have the conversation without fail. I don't care. I coach at a certain level where I'm not that accessible, right? My price point, we're changing that. We're going to be shifting that in the near future. But at this moment right now, most people can't afford to work with me. And so, but that does not determine who I speak with. So if you're a barista, or if you are, working at the local Walmart, I don't care. Everybody needs, I believe that every person needs to hear not just what I have to say, but what I've learned. And I want to make sure that I'm getting it out there as much as possible. So every conversation is valuable. Now, flip that over. There are so many people who meant so much to me throughout my life that made huge impact that never knew it or didn't know it until certain things happened. And, we were just talking about a friend of mine, Amanda, her husband, Adam, just passed. I didn't know Adam that well. We talked a bit about his situation. He's been struggling with leukemia, adult onset leukemia, for 16 years. They solved it year one, and he went to remission for 10 years. Then it came back. They thought they had it under control. He went to remission again, came back again, and it took his life about 2 weeks ago. And I watched him love her through, everything from Caring Bridge, but also through Facebook and Instagram. And I would talk to her every once in a while on the phone, but not that much. And when he did pass, I don't live there. So I traveled into town specifically to make sure I was there for her in that memorial service. And part of the reason for that is because of the massive impact she had on my life when I was a young, early 20s kid trying to figure out the world. And I happened to be a youth pastor, and she was just my intern. And there was within the church, I left that church and was going to another church to work with their youth ministry. And when I left, there were some people in that church who You know, in churchianity, there should not be competition. And you want to assume that everybody is coming from the best place, but we all know everybody has programs. And so when they feel offended or hurt, or, it can trigger some of those negative programs from the past, some of those insecurities, those validation issues. And so people will do what they've always done, which is lash out. So there was a group of parents that were basically behind my back lashing out and saying negative things about me. And Amanda didn't tell me, but I found out that when they were doing that, when she was there and I had already left, that she basically put the kibosh on it immediately and said, Deano came in, he transformed the program, he brought me here so that I could help. And now you're going to bash him because he's supposed to be somewhere else. She said, no, we're not having that. If you say another negative thing about Deano, I am leaving. And you will have nobody to lead your youth ministry, and you guys can have it. I am only here because of him, and also because I committed to him to continue to help you guys through the transition to find your next youth pastor. It's because of him, not. And so I didn't even know this happened. One of the youth group kids heard it from his mom, and he had told me at the new youth group that I was at, which was amazing. She had no clue. But that's the kind of impact you can have by just doing the right things, showing up for people in the right ways, and really loving people where they're at, not where you want them to be. And that transformed not only the way I saw her, but also when Adam came into the picture, I'm like, this guy is winning. Like, he's got the greatest girl in the world who will always be loyal and supportive. And she was. And by going to his memorial service, I learned a lot more about him, how funny he was, how he made everybody feel so important and seen and heard. So that combination, I'm like, what a gift. What a gift they had together.
Absolutely. It's interesting just listening to you share that story. It makes me wonder, as somebody who does read and follow most of the things that you share, I think I see everything that you post, at least on LinkedIn. And I know that you've posted some things on TikTok as well that I've seen. So I follow a lot of the spaces that you're in, and obviously am pretty in tune with your story. I wonder, how do you draw on those lived experiences, or like, it seems like even just in your sharing of the story about your friend and her husband, that you've kind of drawn like some lessons or some really valuable things that you can apply to your own life, and then even really share as part of the offer and coaching that you have. How do you view the connection between your lived experience and the coaching that you offer to folks?
Yeah, well, listen, I always say if somebody hasn't been through it, don't let them coach you through it. The reality is, I've been through so much in my life. It started when I was young, when I discovered that I was gay. And I didn't discover I knew, right? But I fought it.
Right.
I talked about how I cried myself to sleep all throughout high school, just praying that it would go away. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know there's so many people. And also, it's not just homosexuality. There's other people who would cry themselves to sleep because of other validation issues that they thought that they could never overcome, right? And so part of the reason I even became a youth pastor is that I wanted to make an impact in people's lives. And I also wanted to solve my problem. And I always thought my problem was that my sexuality. So I thought if I served God enough, if I did enough things, if enough people prayed over me, spoke in tongues, anointed me with oil, that God would do the miracle that was promised because it was sin. And so when I went to youth ministry, it was a combination of, okay, God, I'm going to serve you so that you can solve my problem. But also, I even love it. I love
Yeah.
changing people's lives and showing up and teaching them how to manage through all the things that I've been trying to manage through myself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until much later, I actually got fired as a youth pastor, which I've only recently been telling people, but I think it's a super powerful thing. And the
Yeah.
reason for that isn't because of a lack of success. I was very successful. I grew a youth ministry from 20 to over 200. I grew a volunteer staff from 4 to over 40. On all the metrics and scales, I was just checking the box. I was doing phenomenal, speaking on bigger and bigger stages. But the more I did that, the more I started to self sabotage because our brain is geared for, and I didn't know it at the time, but our brain is geared for survival, not success. And so if our brain fears our life, our ability to continue, then it's going to do things to get us out of a situation. And in that world, my finances, my social world, my aspirations, my career, everything could collapse and implode if they ever knew that I was struggling with this one thing. That did not invalidate my ability to impact lives clearly, did not invalidate my relationship with God, didn't invalidate anything. But when man comes into it, somebody else's version of what validates and doesn't validate. And so I started self sabotaging. And it wasn't like they just clearly fired me. They just sat me down and said, "What's going on? You don't seem happy." And I said, "I'm not." And they said, "Okay, are you not happy with the position or with the church?" And I said, "I don't think I'm happy with any of it." And they said, "Okay, well, I don't think then we can keep you here." And I was like, "I don't think you
Right.
can either." Like it just blurted out. And they're like, "Okay, then we need to look at an exit strategy." I was like, "Oh, okay." Like I didn't even know what was going on. Like my brain was just like, "We got to get out. We got to get out.
Yeah.
Like we got to run." And it's funny because it led me to Los Angeles, where I tried a bunch of other things to get validation, like acting. I did startups. All of it was like, if I become famous enough, people will have to like me. If I become wealthy enough or solve enough people's problems, people are going to have to like me. And the entire time I was researching and searching, how do I fix my brain? This issue in my brain, this issue. And it wasn't until 35 I really connected all the dots that my issue was never my sexuality, it was always my self-worth. And as long as I was chasing after somebody else's validation instead of my own, I was never going to be able to accomplish what I was put on this earth to do. And it didn't happen overnight, it happened over time. And the things that I coach now are all things that I went through before I even wanted to coach, before I even thought I could be a coach. It was things that I did and applied to figure out, how do I fix myself? And when I got to the place where, I felt really good about myself, about who I was, people kept saying, "Dino, you got to be a coach." And I was like, "No way." Like zero chance of that. Everybody on Instagram with a six pack abs thinks they're a coach. And
True.
it wasn't until, yeah, and it wasn't until a friend sat me down and said, "Dino, listen, do you believe that there are good doctors and bad doctors out there?" And I said, "Yeah, 100%. I know that. My dad died to a bad doctor, right?" And so she said, "Okay." She said, "Well, do the good doctors not call themselves doctors because of the bad ones?" And I said, "Well, no, that's silly." And she said, "So don't worry about the bad coaches. Just be a good coach." And she said, "I already know you are because me and my husband are back together today because of things you've shared with me and conversations we've had that you didn't even know you were doing." And I was like, "All right, I guess I'll check out this coaching thing." And
I love
and so the things that I do now literally are me. Like I always tell people, we're on the journey. If any coach tells you they've arrived, that they're the guru, fire, run.
it.
Like, Tony
Exactly.
Robbins he's not arrived. He's on the
Right.
journey. The things he's doing today, he would never imagined he could have done 10 years ago. You know, I am on the journey. I just am willing to share the journey with everyone to let them know that, like, I'm not perfect. I haven't arrived. And I'm processing through it with all the same tools that I'm sharing and teaching,
Yeah.
because when you use the tools and leverage it, you can make tragedy and challenges and setbacks and obstacles into your best friends,
Sure.
and leverage them to move you in the direction you need to be, not where you've always
Yeah.
been. I don't know if that answered your question.
It did actually, and I think you also may have unintentionally dropped a masterclass for young gay men who are still trying to figure themselves out. The parallels between my own childhood and yours, including the you were an established youth pastor. There was a time whenever I was a worship leader and a youth mentor at my church. I grew up in a Pentecostal church. Knowing religion well enough, you
Yep.
probably know everything that I endured.
Hmm.
But there were definitely some great things that I took away from that experience, and certainly a
That's it.
lifetime of connections with folks. But I learned so much about myself, and ultimately, I too landed in the same place that you did. It was never about the fact that I was gay. It was always about the fact that my own self-worth was in such a place of despair that I couldn't see past that. And once I found that confidence and a little bit became a little bit more self-aware. I definitely will say, much like you're still on the journey, I am definitely still on the journey. I am proud to say I think I learned at least one new major thing that I can apply to my life every single day. And I don't want to quit until I do learn something new every day. But I am still on the journey myself. I have not arrived. I don't know if I'm ever going to arrive. It might happen after I have departed, quite honestly.
Well, there
But
you go. That's when you arrive, right? When you've
yeah,
departed and
exactly.
said,
Right.
I've lived a good life, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or in Christian terms, it would be, well done, good and faithful servant, right? God says
There you
that to
go.
you. And
Yep.
I believe that's what he'll say to me. I believe that's what he'll say to you. Because it's never, it's so funny. We look in, I'll get scriptural for a moment, even though I know this isn't about it. We look at the Pharisees, we always speak about the Pharisees and how they were so arrogant and everything. And I'm like, that's the evangelical church right now. They're so arrogant in so many ways, and they don't realize that they're the Pharisees. They'll preach against it and then they'll
Right.
replicate it. And they don't mean to. It's not coming out of a place of, though they create a lot of harm. It's not coming from, but it's coming from a validation issue, right?
Yeah.
And it's because they're seeking other people's validation and the world's validation that they're good enough as a pastor, as a leader, instead of really only seeking their own validation and God's validation. When you seek only those two things, then you can celebrate everybody else's victory. In church, the problem was everybody was competing. It was in the woodlands, and we had a church that was in a very good growth phase. There was other churches that had 10,000 members. There was other ones, and you would hear other pastors within it be like, oh, but they're like 1 inch deep and 10 miles wide, where we're 10 miles deep and we're 1 inch wide. That's why we're great. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, our goal is not to compare ourselves to these other people. Their job is to reach the people they're going to reach. Our job is to reach the people we reach. And we need to reach people who aren't in either of these churches or the thousands of others that happen to be in Texas. It's the people who aren't in
Right.
churches who need to hear the good word and also just need to feel community, feel connected, feel like they're part of
Yep.
something that's bigger than themselves. And by us nitpicking and, you know, backbiting and all this other stuff, we're actually tearing down what God was trying to create. And I still see it, happening all the time. And it just makes me go, why?
Yeah.
Why this beautiful thing? And, but put man in power for any amount of time, and corruption's easy to
For
corrupt.
sure. We always figure
Yeah.
out a way to become corrupt, even when that
Right.
isn't our initial
Well,
goal.
yeah, because we all
It's
want to be God,
access.
right?
That's
Yeah,
right.
we all want to be God. We all want to be in control. The more control we get, the more we hunger for it. Like, it's a natural thing. And I always tell people, you're not broken. You're just running outdated programs. And that's the reality of, I mean, even me still, I still struggle with things, right? So these pastors, other people, these CEOs, I cannot tell you how many people I speak to. And I tell them what I do, and they go, "Oh, can you talk to my CEO?" Like, literally, like, almost, unless they're the CEO, they're always telling me. And I'm new in Dallas right now, and so I'm meeting a lot of people in great positions, and they're like, "Can you talk to my CEO?" And I'm like, "Well, they have to want to talk to me. They
That's
have to
right.
know there's an issue."
They
Like
have
I
to want to
can't.
work on themselves as well.
Yeah, and I always tell them, listen, they're not broken. They're just running outdated programs, and those programs come from somewhere. They come from the past, and they come from these same things that we received with when we were young, because we were taught we weren't good enough, that we were second class, that we had to look over our shoulder all the time, that we're never going to fit in, that we're never going to have a normal family. that we're never going to
Yeah.
be normal, whatever those things were that were fed to us that made us feel less than. These same people, they're all chasing it, whether it's that their father abandoned them when they were young. And so now they're trying to prove themselves to this father that doesn't exist, but exists in their head. And they're making everybody else miserable in the process because they can't enjoy success and nothing's ever going to be good enough because they don't ever feel like they're good enough. Like it's so easy to tie these things together and start to feel like we're bad people. But the reality, I mean, there are some bad people in the world, don't get me wrong, but the reality is we're not broken. We're just running outdated programs that do not serve our purpose today or the future we're trying to create for tomorrow. And we don't even know it's happening because it's all happening on autopilot. That's why we have to do work.
That the whole idea of running on, outdated programs, I think that really relates to kind of, I think, my own realization and connection to myself over the
Mm,
course of the last 3 years, as
yep.
I've really kind of leaned into, you know, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And the first 6 months after this diagnosis, because I did have this diagnosis, in my 30s, and I also had that 10-year remission when they tell you at the 5-year mark, you're pretty much free and clear. And at the 10-year mark, that cancer comes back to say, ha ha ha, I'm just kidding. I'm
Yeah.
still in control of you. I think for
Yeah.
myself, after I went through like the first 6 months post the stage 4 diagnosis, I got to a place where I sort of just decided I didn't even care if I was in control anymore. Because let's be honest, we're only in control of so many things. There is something out there, whether it's the universe, whether it's God,
Right.
whatever frame of mind you are in yourself, let it be that for you. But for me, I
Mhm.
know that there is something bigger out there that is in control of what is happening. And I'm just letting it be in control. And instead of focusing on what I can't control, I'm focusing on what I can control. And that's kind of why we're here having this conversation today, because I do have the power to share with folks who have impacted me the weight of what their conversation or their support, their commitment has really done for me. I can control that, and in doing that, I've not only found that it's bringing joy to other people, because it's always nice to hear whenever you've left a mark on someone, but
Yeah.
the joy that it brings me personally. So I guess it's a little self-serving and selfish. I've
And
had a
listen,
couple of
if you're fed by celebrating others, that feed often,
yes,
right? Like we should be doing things that make us feel good about who we are.
yeah,
There's a lot of I always say there's a lot of symptoms to problems, and symptoms usually show up as like alcohol, drugs, sex, other things, right? Those are symptoms to a core root problem. That's not the problem. If you try to solve those, that's like putting a band-aid on a pussy wound. It's not going to work. You have to clean it out,
right,
right? And on the flip side of that, it's also like the things that feed us, that make us feel good, that there will be symptoms of that too. And you feeling great about rewarding and celebrating others who have made an impact in your life, that those are good symptoms, right?
yeah.
Those are things that should be happening in your life. And that's showing and I think if you get excited about those things, that's probably a good hint that you're doing things right. So feel good about that.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, for myself, I think when people first like hear the name of the podcast, I've actually had one person say, "Oh, it gives me like feelings of anxiety," or I'm like, "Okay, that's okay." Sometimes you can lean
Yeah.
into those feelings of anxiety and accept what you're not uncomfortable with. And maybe, just maybe, you experience like a little bit of growth in that moment that you let yourself be okay being uncomfortable. And also, it's not about you. It's me, and it's my
Yeah.
podcast, and these are people who have made a difference in my life, and I want
Yeah.
them to know. I recorded an episode with my kids. My kids are grown, and I have a son and a daughter, and My son is in the army and he's a very stoic man and he takes after
Mm.
my father. My father was a man of very few words. So whenever he spoke, you listened because you knew something was about, like, it was going to be a mic drop moment or you were in severe trouble. So you had to pay attention. But my son he has acquired my father's like
Mm.
silence, and he's a person that observes the room and listens to the conversation before he jumps in. I just jump in. If there are people that I want to meet or say hello to, like, I will just insert myself into a circle of people and say, I want to know who you all are and what are we talking about
Yeah.
here. But in that conversation with my kids, I was actually able to share some things that I felt like my kids knew, but that I had never really taken a
Mm.
moment to actually say to them. And just hearing like their appreciation, because I know, like, the one thing I've
Yeah.
always wanted from both of my parents, nothing more than just them being proud of me. Like, that's what I've wanted my entire life. And for whatever reason, I still feel like I'm still trying to get there to where they are proud of me. But my kids know, like, if they do nothing more than they're doing right now, and they are excellent parents and they're loving people and they're
Mm.
open minded and they're transparent and they welcome everyone, if they do nothing more than what they've done right now, this is all they ever need to do to know that not only am I proud of them and their mother's proud of them, but that they should also be proud. You
Yeah.
know, they come from a broken home. Their mother and I were divorced after we had been married for 12 years. They have a father who came out at the age of 31, which I'm sure whenever my kids were in high school, that was no easier than being gay
Right.
yourself and coming out. And they've taken all of those lessons and struggles and they've really made them like they've used them to create foundations around their life. And so I'm hoping that was a very long-winded way of arriving at this point. I'm hoping that even if someone may not connect with the urgency of, being on the precipice of death at some point in time, and of course we're all going to die. Some of us just have like an hourglass sitting on our shoulders that we literally feel like each grain of sand hit and wonder, okay, is it going to be next month whenever the numbers double and the cancer has spread, or am I going to get, 3 more
Mm.
years like this where I can just live fully and be fully engaged in life and not worry about the rest of the shit that people deal with? Because that's really been, I think, the key to my personal success and health, is that I really have just leaned into trying to give back, trying to be a better person every day. And I did strive for that my entire life, by the way. This isn't something that just happened
Of
in 3 years,
course.
but in the last 3 years, I've really removed all of the obstacles that prevented me from being my best self. There are
Mm.
still some things that I wish I did differently or was better at. Managing money, I will safely say I would love to be a I would love to have a better relationship with it. It just fuels
Yeah.
all of my obsessions right now. But I
Mm.
don't think that's a lesson that I'm going to give myself the time to learn, because I would rather focus on this, like these human connections, and really making the most out of these relationships that I've been fortunate enough to be blessed with.
Yeah,
I
and I think
one
what you just
Yeah.
said, which I think is interesting, is you've been striving for it all your life. Listen, I've been trying to make impact all my life. The difference between where I am at now and where I was, especially in my youth and in my 20s and 30s, is that there was still a bit of ego in it, where I needed to help people in order to feel valid. And now I help people and there's no ego in it. I, I change lives all the time. I 100% love that. But I actually don't have the power to change anyone's life. Only they have the power to change their own lives. So I just get to be this really cool bystander that's holding their hand and getting to watch them do the things that they're fully capable of, but never knew and didn't have the tools to do on a daily, weekly basis. And there's no ego in it. Like I don't toot my own horn because they did this. Like that's not because of me. And I tell them this all the time because a lot of times my clients will call and say, "You'll be so proud of me," and I'll be like, "I'm sure I will. Tell me more." And they'll be like, "Yeah, blah 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 blah," and I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing! You did that." And I'll give you an example. One of my clients called me up about 9 months after we were working together, and he, was CEO of two different companies and had a lot of challenges when he came to me. And we were able to fix his relationship with both of his boards, his relationship to himself, to dating, to all these other things. And 9 months later, he called me up and said, Dino, I think you made me $1 billion. And I said, well, that's pretty incredible. I can't make myself $1 billion, so I doubt I made you anything. I said, but tell me more. And it was really about him, who has the capacity, clearly, to make $1 billion, to have the flexibility and the freedom, the things removed from him, the ego and the other things that were limiting the way he moved through life, so that he would have the freedom to pursue the elements that were able to make him $1 billion. Like it's amazing. And I say that to you about what you're doing now, right? You're making impact. You're making sure people know that they're valuable, that you're rewarding them, and you've wanted to do that all your life, but now you're not doing it with ego because it's not about you. This is about them. And
Yeah.
you said that when you said to them, like, I'm sorry, this is about me, but at the same time, it's really not about you. It's
Right.
really about the other people. So I love all of what you just said. And I just wanted to echo, like,
Yeah.
there is something about being older and being wiser if you've done the work.
Sure.
We know a lot of people who are in our age range who are not wiser, who are not better, who are still acting like 6 year olds, and still in pissing contests because they haven't done the work. But when you've done the work, then, there's so much freedom and flexibility and celebrating everyone and also not bringing ego to the table. It's amazing.
Love that. It's actually a perfect seg into the last few minutes of
Oh,
our
really?
conversation today, and brings me to the point of this invitation, which is I would love to share a message that I wrote to you again,
Mm,
not even knowing if I was ever going to deliver it, and certainly not knowing at the
mm,
time that it would be in this format that I would deliver it. But nonetheless, it's the message that is kind of the reason for me asking you to join me today. So I'm going to share that with you, and then I'll give you a minute or so to respond, and then we'll wrap up. But Dino, I want you to know I believe in these thoughts so much. There are people we encounter in life who never realize the impact that they have had on us. Sometimes it's a fleeting moment, it might be a short conversation, or just the space that you provided for another human being. For me, you are one of those people that created an impact that you had no idea. And really everything that I have done in the last few years, I somewhat credit to our conversation. After my cancer diagnosis, we met to talk about your men's coaching cohort that you were working on. And in that moment, I had no idea what that conversation would stir in me and what it would eventually lead me to do. It was during that conversation for the first time that I felt that coaching could actually be the calling that I had been searching for really throughout my entire career. That conversation planted the seed that grew into the work that now I know is my true purpose in life. And without that moment, without that hour that we spent together virtually over Teams, I may not have discovered this path. You've done an excellent job of modeling what it looks like to create space for others, even when you're carrying your own burdens and trials. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for showing up for me that day. I want to thank you for the space that you created. And I want to thank you for the quiet but powerful impact you've had on me, not only in that moment when we were talking to each other, but in the things that you share about yourself and about your life and about your own journey of growth. You may not have known it then, but you know it now. Your influence definitely helped shape the direction of my life, and it has absolutely impacted the trajectory of my future. And I truly, truly thank you for that. And on behalf of the hundreds, maybe thousands of other people whose path that you've crossed where you've left the same impact, I am confident that I'm speaking for them as well in sharing this message with you. So I hope you take that and that what you will, but please know that my life has definitely been changed as a result of the time that we spent together. And I'm definitely going to be following along as you continue your journey. I'll be doing mine parallel.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I receive all of that. Yeah, it's funny because I kind of knew you were going to do that, but to hear it in real time and in person, like it feels really great. So thank you. And I think what's really cool and what you just shared and also represent is the ripple effect that we all can have in people's lives. Because that conversation, which to be honest, I don't remember anything from,
Sure.
created the seed that you watered, that you grew, that you made sure to protect and curate and do all the things that you did, because I couldn't have done that, is also really cool because you're affecting all these other people's lives, all the people at your work that you're now coaching and all and empowering and equipping them. And now you're doing this podcast and all these other things that may not have come out of, or might not have shifted or changed or been a reality unless we had this conversation for an hour that I don't remember. So thank you so much. But that has very little to do with me as much as it has to do with you being ready and willing and then taking your arms and marching and doing something with it. There's that phrase, throw pearls before swine. There was a point in my life where I used to do that. I used to offer advice, unsolicited opinion. And by the way, the information was right on. It was what somebody needed to hear. But if they're not ready to hear it, nothing happens. You're throwing pearls before swine. And I've learned as I've aged and as I've become more confident and equipped that I only offer to those who are willing to receive. And when they're willing to receive, there's always going to be an impact. And I say that with you as well. Like everyone who listens, everyone who watches any of your podcasts, anyone that you're interacting with, like when they're willing and they're open, then the impact you're making is huge. And you know this, that every time you send me a LinkedIn message and we hadn't talked in a while, it's like, oh my gosh, it makes me so happy. Like I tell you that all the time, like, oh, this makes me so happy. Yeah, you just made me smile seeing your name. And it's partially because I know the journey you're on. And every day that you're alive means it's another day you're making impact.
Right.
And it's also like as a celebration of you getting to continue this journey, because I know that the journey you're on is making an impact in my life, but also in other people's lives. And the longer you're on that journey, the more impact you're making. So that's why I say every single time,
That's right.
like it just makes me so happy to see your DM on LinkedIn. And I will say, I think we got originally connected. You probably found me when I was taking care of my mom. And there was an 18-month period where, my mom had had lung cancer once before. She had breast cancer like a decade before, then she had lung cancer. I had taken care of her. And then this was the second time, but this one was the sneaky little rat bastard, small cell, that was also traveling to her brain. And I was sharing my journey while coaching, but also sharing my journey on LinkedIn. And one of those posts went kind of mega viral, right? And all of a sudden, at the least optimal time to take on new clients and the least optimal time to be dealing with this, there was all this, celebration. And there, I think also people really responded to the fact, like, my response to death is different than others. Your response to death is different than others. I almost died once, a little different, motorcycle wreck, half roll from, the femur break, cutting the artery, bleeding to death. Didn't really know it at the time. But then I've been around death, with my father dying when I was just 21, just turned kind of suddenly. And then with my mom and going through that journey. And I will tell you, like, people are always like, oh my gosh, that's so hard. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, that was like the most beautiful, amazing time that I've ever got to spend in my life, because as kids we never appreciate our parents, and as adults we don't really get the chance to get to know them, and really on a good level, on a regular basis. And moving in and being there and doing life with my mom, I learned all these things, not only about me but also about her, about my dad, about the world they lived in before I existed, about the world that they went through while I was a kid, and not processing anything. From 0 to 12, we only think about ourselves 100%. After 12, we go through puberty, we start thinking about others, but only in the sexual contents, right? And the acceptance thing, like we're then in confirmation bias instead of programming bias. And so we just don't think. And so this time was like so rich and so valuable. And then also being able to usher somebody from this life and transitioning into the next in the way that they wanted, showing up as authentically as I could. I always said, there was one chef. I was always the sous chef. She got to make the decisions. But walking through that with her and helping her, it changed who I was, changed my constitution, how I thought about the world, how I wanted to move through it. And also it was such a privilege. So people look at death as a bad thing. I always look at death as a transition into the next thing, and such a gift if people are willing to walk alongside the people they love while they're going through it, to discover all the richness that there is. And I cannot imagine how much your kids and your husband is getting through this, not only with the way you're handling it, because you're not a victim and you don't play the victim. And a lot of people go to the victimhood, and I understand why, right? They're like, woe is me, but that serves no one and doesn't move anything forward. The way that you've handled it and the opportunities, you're making every moment rich for yourself, but also for them, and creating a legacy and a lasting like impact that we will not be able to understand until we get to the other side. So I celebrate and cherish your journey, and so like thankful that I got to be even a little itty bitty part of it and got to come on here and chat with you about it. So thank you. Thank you for including me in that.
It has been my pleasure, and it is extremely rare that I say this, but just listening to your response and everything that you shared, especially about, the journey that you were on with your mother as she was, to your point, passing on to what's next for her.
Yeah.
I think I might be speechless, and that doesn't ever happen. So I might just end us today with one simple thought about invisible impact. And I think it has obviously become really relevant to me in the last few years, that whenever someone does create that space where you feel safe to show up authentically, or they share something in their message with you or a conversation with you that really kind of alters the way that you were heading, or the path that you were going to take. Sometimes, while that impact might be invisible, it can completely change the course of someone's life. And I think our conversation today is just really great proof of that. To Deano's point, he doesn't remember that conversation, but that conversation, that really did change the course of the direction that I was heading. And had I not been on that call in that moment, having that conversation, this could all have been lost on me. Like the growth that I've experienced over the course of the last 3 years, I was much longer winded than I thought I was going to be there. But I think that's where we'll end today. And I think I'll give you all a challenge. If there's been a person like Deano in your life that in one of those fleeting moments, they dropped a golden nugget of a life lesson in your lap that you then could take and make your own and chart your own destiny with that, reach out to that person and let them know what those words meant, and give them the opportunity to experience the joy of knowing the impact that they've had on someone else. It doesn't have to take 30 or 45 minutes. You can share that impact in 5 minutes And I think that's my challenge for you. Stop the podcast and share it with someone, and then pick up the phone and tell that person why you shared it with them, and make that person the
Mm.
person that's had invisible impact on you. Thanks, Deano, for joining me today. And as always, of course, I'll be following your adventures and your journey, and I know that we'll stay in contact. So have a great day, everyone. Thanks for listening, and catch us again next Tuesday when we drop the next episode of Dying Out Loud.